Welcome to the Land Investing Business Secret Podcast, where each short episode we talk about the strategies, experiences, and the tools to help you launch, grow, and scale your land business. Learn how to find freedom within your own business, find out ways to build consistency in your processes, and hear how other everyday land investors are winning so you can get to the next step closer to building your dream life through your land business. And I'm your host of the Land Investing Business Secrets Podcast by Pebble, Jesse Kwong. Hey, how's it going? It's Jesse here of the Land Investing Business Secrets Podcast. I've got a special guest here. His name is Chris Johnsen, and I got a chance to meet Chris. I've interacted with him through Pebble before, and I got to meet him out at a conference recently that I went to out in St. Louis, and I loved hearing his story and all the changes he went through. And believe it or not, he's only 2 years into this game, and he has found huge success early on, and he's going to share his story. And I think it's super inspirational. I don't know. I kept telling Chris during the podcast that it just seems so smooth sailing, and he's so nonchalant about it. But I think there's so much that you're going to be able to take away in terms of the way he approaches running a business and how to grow the business and things that he just wants to try, and clarity on what he wants in life as well. So anyways, I really enjoyed this episode here with Chris. I hope you do as well. Anyways, cheers. All right, I've got my guest here, Chris. Chris, how are you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. We finally got to meet in person when we were both out in St. Louis. That was some good times out there. We were out there for Rubicon not too long ago, but glad I got to spend some time with you and chat a little bit about what's going on with you and business and life. And I would love to get you to share your story on how you got started in land, because I think a lot of people might be walking that similar path. So why don't you give us a little context, Chris, and sort of help us understand, how did you get into land? Where'd you come from, and sort of your backstory with starting your real estate investing business?
Yeah, so I feel like my story is a little bit unique. I had no real estate background. I was an electrician for 15 years, and I had a vacant lot next to my house where I'm at now. Um, and I knew I wanted to buy that lot, but I didn't know how to go about it. So I figured out how to use the assessor's website and found this lady and bought it from her. And a couple weeks later, after I had bought the lot next to my house, somebody had come up to me and they asked me if if I would sell it to them for about twice as much as what I bought it for. So I just it kind of sparked an idea in my head. So I got on the assessor's website in the county next to me and basically did the same thing. Just clicked on vacant parcels and manually wrote down the names and addresses, and then I kind of manually skip traced them too. And I did that for about 2 months before I found another property to buy. And I think I bought that one for 15 and sold it for like 38 or something like that. And I just realized at that point, that's a lot of electrical work you have to do to make 18 grand. So I kept doing it super manually like that for the next 2 deals that I did. And then after like the third deal, I told my wife, I was just like, look, I'm going to start phasing out electrical work. I'm going to start doing this, more full time. And at first I didn't realize that land investing was like actually a thing. And then after I bought my first piece and sold it, I started diving further into like the actual business of it. And that's when I realized it's a whole thing.
So by the time you did the third deal, or you were working on that third deal, you already knew, hey, this is actually something you can do on an ongoing basis. This is an actual business model here. Before you actually told your wife, hey, I'm thinking about, slowing down with electrical work. Is that right?
Yeah. So, I mean, it probably took about 10 deals before it really proved the concept to where I was like, okay, this can keep happening if I want it to. But yeah, after the third deal, I didn't quit. I didn't shut my business down immediately because I had my own electrical business at the time. I was doing pretty well. I was making like maybe 100 grand a year, and Not really killing myself, but it was obviously much harder than land investing. But yeah, I basically phased it out over the next couple of deals. I did less and less electrical work, and more land investing work until I just shut it down. So
What does that feel like? I mean, you're still walking into the unknown. You've done only a couple deals, and you sort of like putting all your trust and eggs into this basket. I mean, I would assume mentally you've already checked out with being an electrician. I mean, with the kind of money that you're making, let's be honest here, you're probably like, forget this. Like, I'm going to go full into to land. You may not have expressed that fully to your wife at that time. I don't know,
yeah.
but what was actually going through your head?
Well, I'm lucky. I have a really good wife, and she's also an emergency room nurse. So she had a full time job at the time, also. So we had insurance covered. She only worked 3 days a week, but it was still considered full time. So, like, even if I just crashed and burned, like, we still had a little bit of a buffer, and I knew that I could always go back, and still could always go back to electrical work if I wanted to. So it wasn't that scary. I just and I never really had a big dip or anything in the land business. It's just been kind of going up and up and up. Um, it's gotten a little tougher over the last year, but I'm also going after tougher property. So I feel like um, but I'm super grateful for the opportunity and lucky that I stumbled across it for sure.
You mentioned like you were doing things super manually at the beginning. Like you were literally, I mean, you looked at the neighboring parcel, then you looked for another one around your area. But if you hadn't done that, I'm sure. I mean, what were some things you feel like you learned from doing it manually? Because I think a lot of people step into land, like they literally come in saying, "I just want to automate this whole thing,"
Yeah.
and I don't want to do anything, type of thing. But what do you think? Where's the value in doing things manually? Because there is value. I know there is. I've seen it, and I can see the different in caliber of people that get into land. Like the
Yeah.
people that want to get in the weeds of things tend to outperform or outlast those that come in and just want to automate everything and not really get in the weeds of things. But what are some of the takeaways that you had or key lessons that you learned early on doing things manually, and maybe some of our listeners can sort of look out for when they're in that space of doing things manually?
Yeah, I definitely think it helped because I kind of scrapped my way all the way through the business. Like, finding the deals at first, just figured it out on my own. And then figuring out how to sell them is a whole nother beast, especially selling them like at scale. Once I got past my 10th deal and I started, because up until about 10 deals in, I was just rolling my money into the next deal. And then I discovered that you can double close. And then that's when it kind of really took off. And double closing's awesome. Like, you don't have to put up any of your own funds. You just get the check for the difference of the two closings. But it's tough to sell a property that fast unless you get it under contract for a really good price. So I mean, I'm basically like a wholesaler. It's like a mix between a wholesaler and a retail seller, because I might sell stuff at 85% of market value consistently because I can sell it relatively quick at that price. But if I buy it at 65% of market value, that's still a little 20% spread. And if you do a property that's big enough, $100,000, you can make 20 grand pretty easily. So I don't really target anything nowadays. I don't target anything under 10 acres. And it's mostly like rural recreational tracts or large home sites, or even I've been doing a lot of farmland lately. So my business, every 3 to 6 months, it looks totally different. I've only been doing it for 2 years. I got started in March of 2022. So, and we just got to April of 2024. So right at 2 years. Um, yeah, I would say every 6 months, my business looks totally different. Like, I started doing nothing but texting at first from my personal cell phone, and then upgraded that to smarter contact and started mass texting. And that's where I got deal maybe 10 through 30. And then moved on to launch control up until when everybody else stopped texting in maybe like October of 23. Um, and now I get most of my deals through cold calling, specifically land caller.
Now, why do you think you kind of go through so many changes you would say roughly every 6 months? Is it because you're hearing something different or you're figuring out something's not working? What typically leads you to transition into something new?
I think it's more about figuring out what does work versus what doesn't work, because anything works. Like you can sell desert lots and make it work. It's just I'm trying to be the most efficient with my time as possible. Um, and that means making the most money as possible with the time that I want to work. I don't want to work 80 hours a week. I'm not that kind of guy. I have two young kids at home and a wife, and um, I enjoy spending time with them. I don't want to work 80 hours a week. So I'd rather do the same volume as I've done the last 2 years, but just bigger deals. And I think over the last 2 years, I've averaged about 40 deals a year. Um, and this year, I hope to do the same thing, just a little bit bigger price tags.
So walk us through. Okay, last 2 years, you've been changing your strategy. You just kind of walked us through, but that was on the marketing side. Well, again, walk us through your marketing. Like, how did things look like when you first started? You were doing things manually. You were looking for properties manually. What did you do after that? What did you do after that, and how did it mutate to what it is today? Let's talk specifically marketing then.
Yeah. Yeah. So the original marketing was literally just texting people from my cell phone, and using a skip trace, getting on Google and typing in true people search or whatever it is that that where you could put their name and their address in, and it gives you a couple phone numbers. That was the original marketing. And then I downloaded Smarter Contact, or signed up for Smarter Contact, and I used PropStream to pull my list. And I would filter it down, I think like maybe 1 acre and up, for the first few months. So I would do smaller stuff that I could actually afford, between $10,000 and $30,000 purchase price. And then I would say, after 6 months to a year, I bumped that up to 5 acres and up. And I was using Smarter Contact, doing the same thing, pulling my list from PropStream, but just bigger properties.
The only reason you bumped up to bigger properties, I'm assuming, was probably because of the profits itself.
The profits, and because I discovered double closing, and I didn't need to, I was limiting myself to those small properties just because I could technically afford them.
So okay, so now with double closing, um, did were you double closing on smaller properties, or you just said like this is not even worth it, and it's easier to I don't know, double close with larger properties?
Yeah, I think I double closed a couple small properties first, just to like test it out and like see how it worked. And you have to make sure your title company's good with that kind of thing. And uh, double closing is a little bit tough because, like I said, you have to sell it relatively quickly, depending on what kind of purchase agreement or option agreement you use with the seller and how much time they give you to close. But at first, I was just using regular purchase agreements, 45 days closing. So like as soon as I got that purchase agreement signed, I was like basically pounding the pavement for these sellers, which is also, benefited me in the long run, because I made so many connections with different land buyers and developers, and um, just other investors, just from doing that, just from getting on Facebook and finding those guys that are also selling land, and contacting them, and reaching out to all the local real estate agents in areas that I work. And uh, I mean, it's paid off, because it's actually turned into, a couple of the people that I've met have turned into partners of mine, because when I find a property in a specific area that I know they buy in, like they're the first person I send it to. And a lot of these guys are older; they've been doing it for 40 years, so they'll basically partner with me, fund the deal, um, and either let me assign it to them, or let me double close on it. But that I would have never found those guys without just being in the trenches, and like I said, pounding the pavement trying to find those sellers. It's tough.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And so you moved into bigger properties, and you were wholesaling them, and you were still texting at that point, mass texting through Smarter Contact. Is that right?
Yes, I didn't start cold calling until last December. I stopped my text message campaigns in around October, and then I might have had a couple deals trickle in from October to December. But yeah, that's
Now, in
Yeah.
between that time, you also transitioned into using launch control as well.
I used launch control from like month 14 to up until last October. So
Oh, okay, got you. Okay, got you, got you.
yeah, I used launch control because I thought it was Smarter Contact's fault that I was, I'd get blocked or ghosted or my response rates were going down. So I was like, all right, well, let me try launch control. And it worked really well for about 4 months or so. And then it started going downhill. And I realized that's not launch control's fault or Smarter Contact's fault. It's just the nature of the beast, I guess. Um, but land caller's been working out pretty well. I would say if anybody's going to do that, they should definitely, take recordings of their callers, like caller conversations, and just try to uh, quality control it as much as possible because they are. I'm in a rural market here, so I was very skeptical of cold calling, especially having someone foreign with a little bit of a foreign accent. Even though my callers are pretty good, but they have a little bit of a foreign accent, and you're talking to these people that are in the middle of nowhere, uh, country area, and it's weird. It's a weird dynamic. So I was really surprised that it was working so well.
Somebody who's stepping into cold calling, and we had it's Joe that runs line caller, but um, what are some of the things that you do right now to quality control that? Um, you're listening to calls. Like, are you able to coach them? Are you able to give feedback on how you want your calls to work? Do you give them a script?
So they provided me with a script that I kind of doctored up a little bit,
Okay.
and it was kind of like a collaborative thing, I guess. Um, I didn't do any quality control for probably the first 2 months, and then response rates were not great. And I finally like listened to some of their calls, and I was like, okay,
Okay.
this is off. So we had to have a
What was off about those calls you felt?
um, I, I think the callers were wrong for my area. Their accents were super thick.
Mm,
But I got some new callers, and they've been working out much better. And then the cadence, like just the cadence of, I was pretty comfortable with the script, but just the way they spoke to the sellers and the whole cadence of the conversation was off. It just felt very funny, and they were
yeah.
also having a little bit of a hard time understanding each other
Huh.
for obvious reasons. Uh, but yeah, that's pretty much it. What was your other question about the?
No, no. I just wanted to know, again, what was sort of that big, what was that big thing that you felt was off about the call? So, I mean, it sounds like accents and speech style. I don't even know what the proper terms are. Makes a big difference. So you made the switch to that, and you saw sort of a pickup in your response rates then.
Yeah. So when I got my new callers, the response rates were much better. But it was my fault because it was 2 months before I even listened to one of my callers. Uh, but the reason you go with one of those agencies and you don't hire your own cold caller is because I don't want to do all that. I don't want to do that all that quality control. Like that's why I'm paying a premium for an agency rather than hiring just going to Upwork or whatever and hiring some guy to call people all day long.
Yeah. But I guess it does show that, having the founder involved and having your finger on that pulse does make a big difference. Otherwise, they would have continued to run cold calling for you. You wouldn't have known the quality of the calls until you checked in, and you might have given up on cold calling. So yeah, it's definitely a fine balance. Like, you do want to. I find this here internally with my team too. It's like, like I'm not in support. We do a lot of support, but I do have to have a regular pulse check on, everything from tonality to brand tone to like the positivity in our kind of communication. Are we digging deep enough? Like, these things are sort of needed, as we sort of I mean, yeah, it's needed as a founder to kind of, or someone to manage and check in. But I think the big lesson would be also, even if you're working with service like that, you do need to check in. So are you currently still sort of doing a pulse check from time to time with your cold callers?
I haven't in the last few weeks. The response rates have been good though, so I
Right.
should
So you have
probably.
an indicator there that you can sort of monitor and track then.
The other thing is I'm horrible with like outsourcing things. I have one assistant right now, and she kind of handles. So that began organically. She was my title agent, uh, and she ended up her branch closed down, so she needed a job. So she came on with me for a while. Um, she was full time for a while. Now she's just part time because she needed a. She's a mother of two and needed like insurance and everything, and I just wasn't ready for that. So she got a a 9 to 5, and then she works for me on the side doing bookkeeping and just like general admin tasks, writing purchase agreements, things like that. And then 2 days ago, I hired my first acquisitions manager, which was like, yeah, that was a big step for me. I've been thinking about it, praying about it, and just wondering what to do for the last probably 3 or 4 months. And I don't know how it's going to work out yet. I think it's going to work out really well. He's a friend of mine. We went to high school together, um, and he had heard my podcast on when I had done a podcast with Seth at Ari Tipster, and he had heard that and reached out to me and was super interested in just getting involved with the land business. And he was actually texting people from his personal cell phone number and just like trying to pick up a deal. And he did that for about 2 months. And he didn't find a deal, but he was close a couple times, and he worked so hard at it that I was like, all right, maybe I should just hire this guy and see what happens. So he's just part time. He's working like 10 hours a week right now, but I'd imagine it's going to eventually increase.
Congrats on that. I mean, 2 years, a lot has gone on in 2 years. You started in 2022. What, when in 2022?
March.
Okay, so you literally just hit a 2 year mark then. Wow, and things have changed so much for you. Are you just sort of like just going with it? It seems you're so nonchalant about all these changes. And to be frank, a lot of people, and I wonder if your experience being a business owner as an electrician, you know, gave you assurance about yourself and your resourcefulness. Probably, would you say that plays a factor into this? Like, it just seems so. I don't know. It almost seems like a smooth ride for you. I don't know another better word, but would you describe it like that? And what do you think has caused it to be like that?
Yeah. Well, quitting my electrical job, well paying job, to start an electrical business of my own, that was actually a much scarier jump than self employment to a different sort of self employment. But yeah, I mean, it's not like they have a whole lot of similarities besides the business side of it. Uh, but I do think that definitely helped just being out on my own and like knowing like if all else fails, I always have things that I could fall back on. I think that's what gives me my ease of mind. Plus, I have just a great family around me, and like my mom and dad are here where we live. My in laws are here. Like we have so much help with the kids. Uh, I'm in a really good situation, so I feel like that plays a factor too.
Yeah, having a support network like that must be incredibly, yeah, helpful as well in terms of your confidence to kind of be out on your own and knowing you have that support. Um, Out of curiosity, when you first started land, did you have kids?
Yeah. So my my wife was pregnant, or maybe we had a like 3 month old or something like that. Well, he's three now, so he would have been one year old when I started. So, and then that was still scarier. When I quit my electrical job, I was about to propose to my wife. Like we were about to get married, and then I was like scrapping to get electrical work, and that was still much scarier than the land starting the land business. But yeah, I had two young kids, but I did it for them though because electrical work, like I'm not getting paid unless I'm out there physically doing the work. And I had one helper, but for the most part, it was just all me. And I had to put 40 to 55 hours a weekend, no matter what, if I was going to get any money. So, and then this, you could do it for 4 hours a day and make a decent living if you wanted to.
It's just yeah, it's awesome to hear how awesome a transition. And I definitely think, I can definitely see the jump from quitting your regular 9 to 5. It is a big mental shift. Once you're on your own, it's like subconsciously, I think we just know how resourceful we are when we're out on our own. And probably you transitioning into something else was, and it's nice that you've already started proving the concept, and you sort of did that accidentally. I'm sure it was a big help as well. Um, Chris, let's fast forward to today. What are you trying now? What's the next thing that you're trying in the land business? Whether it's the property type or your marketing, what's going on with you and your land business right now?
Yeah. So, kind of like what I said earlier, I'd like to do the same volume of flips anyway, or assignments or wholesales or whatever it is. And then I also want to add in a couple subdivides per year, which I've already done. I'm on my second one this year. I'd like to do one or two more before the end of the year. But I just bought 138 acres. I'm using bank financing for the first time, which was a big step and also pretty scary. It's like a $4,500 a month note until I get this thing sold off. So I've got my like dirt work guys and my surveyor starting tomorrow, and I think it's going to go pretty smooth. But it's still you know that land's worth more than my house is, so it's just like a it's probably three times as much as my mortgage note is.
I love how nonchalant you are about things. Let me ask you this. I mean, you said you want to keep up the amount of volume that you do. What is the typical volume that you do with flips?
Yeah, so 40 a year, so whatever that is a month, maybe three deals a month,
Yeah.
four deals a month.
Like that's one of the things I notice about you, and I noticed this about you when we met in St. Louis. That I don't want to use. It's not that you're content. It's but because I see you're trying different things, you're experimenting different things, but at the same time, I feel like you're not. Sometimes this land game feels a little bit like a rat race too, from everybody working in the space of land, and you just seem to be rolling on and trucking along, doing what you're doing. What keeps you moving? What motivates you in land? Is it purely the dollar here? Are you just enjoying the process? You're happy where you're at, and is it that you want to keep it to a certain amount of hours so you can spend time with your family? What goes on in your mind there?
A little bit of all of that. Yeah, what doesn't keep me in land is making seller calls. That's not what's keeping me here. But yeah, working, having a job where I can work 30 to 40 hours a week from home and make really good money, that motivates me. And just, having been an electrician, I've spent months digging trenches and like running pipe underground and in the most horrible heat you've ever even imagined. So like the fact that I'm sitting here like sending text and calling people, it's like this is literally nothing. So I'm super grateful for that. So that might have something to do with it. Um, yeah, my family, just being able to, coach my son's soccer team. We're just getting into it. He's got his first T-ball game is Saturday, and that's going to be awesome to go to. And I'm the coach, so I see all these parents that are missing all these games and they can't bring their kid to practice, and they don't see them in the morning, and they might get an hour with them at nighttime. Like that all motivates me.
Yeah, I feel like you have a very clear vision of what you want your life to look like. Whether you actively think about that or pray about that, I'm not sure, but it sounds like that is, and that's the sense I kind of got speaking with you in person. And I think that's so important to know what you want when you're coming into running a business like this. Being very clear of who you're doing it for, who it affects. I think that is hugely important.
Well,
So okay, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I feel the same way sometimes though. I have shiny object syndrome, and I'll go to these conferences and you hear all the crazy stuff people are doing, and they're so successful and they're doing these huge projects and they're making millions of dollars, on per deal. And it makes you like every time I get home from one of these things, I feel a little bit. like I feel myself feeling ungrateful for what I have, and like just second guessing the things that I'm doing. So it's hard to go to those conferences and have all these conversations, and then instead of just being overwhelmed with all of the knowledge out there, like actually taking two or three things that you learned that weekend or that week and implementing them to make your life a little bit better, and not trying to emulate what everybody else is doing.
Right, right, right. Yeah, I love that. Somehow it sounds like you stay focused, and you don't. I think it sounds like you don't get that shiny ball syndrome, but who knows what you're thinking exactly. But um, so yeah, coming back to what you're working on, you're trying to do the same amount of volume with flips. Have you had to change anything in your strategy to keep up with that volume?
So, like I said, I think my strategy is kind of always changing. It's just like an evolving thing because I don't. I've only sent one mail campaign ever. Like I've only got about 4 months of cold calling under my belt, so I'm still kind of like. I mean, I think I've got it figured out, but um, we'll see. I don't know if I'll implement text back in. Um, but yeah, what was the original question?
Just is there anything that you need to do to keep up that volume currently? Like because 40 flips was it a year? Um, might look different with the amount of with the marketing strategy back then, like last year versus now to keep that up. Like you want that target of 40. So is there anything that you have to do differently right now to keep up with the 40? Or is it, yeah, that would be the question there.
Yeah, well, the reason that I was just even saying 40 is because it's no more work to do a $200,000 deal than it is to do a $20,000 deal for the most part. Um, so that's kind of the reason I wanted to stay around that number. But I just hired this acquisitions manager, and maybe that unlocks 55 deals a year. I don't know. I don't know what it'll do. If it just gives me a couple of my hours of week back, then it's worth it to me. But I think it'll do more than that. I think it'll really elevate my business in the long run.
For those that are listening who don't know what an acquisition manager is, what is an acquisition manager? What are their responsibilities for? And yeah, what does that look like?
Yeah, that's just kind of a made up title too. But he just right now he manages my incoming leads. So I'm training him to start doing his own calling. So they'll submit a lead, and then he will check out the notes and then call them back and gather a little information. So on cold calling leads, we'll usually have the first, my cold caller will call. They'll submit a lead. We'll call them back the first time just to introduce ourselves, get a little more information about the property. I always want to have land ID opened up and like looking at the property while I'm talking to them, so they know I'm talking exactly about their property, and like I mentioned stuff that they probably don't even know about it. And then on the second call, sometimes we'll make the offer on that one, but sometimes it'll be just one more call with a couple more questions, and then either the second or third call will make the actual offer.
Got you. And that's everything that your new acquisition manager is sort of responsible for then?
Yeah, for right now, he only started 2 days ago, so I will be working more onto his plate, because I want him and my assistant to be talking back and forth, and I'd like to I'd like to get it to where lead comes in, he seals the deal, sends it to my assistant, she gets the purchase agreement up, and like that would be awesome if I didn't have to touch anything. Um, now that's going to be a long time away, I think. But if I could just focus on a little bit bigger things, like more subdivides, stuff that requires deeper thoughts, these portfolios that now that I've been like doing it for 2 years, I'm meeting people that are bringing me deals sometimes. So like just recently, we had a local investor brought me a portfolio of land deals, and that's a lot tougher than just comping a 20-acre piece of property. Like you really got to get in there, and some of these are in the city limits, some of them are development projects, some of them are like rural land. So I probably spent like 4 hours just like making notes and doing due diligence on and comping stuff just to get that report ready for her. And I couldn't do that without some help because
Is that where you like to spend your time at? Is that what you enjoy, analyzing and getting into the weeds of things?
yeah, I mean, I do enjoy talking to some sellers. It just gets old every once in a while, especially just day after day. But yeah, I would love because I don't even know what that looks like yet. I've been so in the weeds of my business that I don't even know what I'm capable of yet because I've literally just been doing task for the last 2 years. Uh, they're high paying task, but they don't like they should be. There's a lot of stuff I need to outsource that I have not outsourced, and I'm working on that.
How many hours a week do you think eventually, once you get your acquisition manager up to speed, where ideally, how many hours do you think you're saving on a weekly basis here?
Maybe 10 to 15. Yeah, yeah, I think so. And if I could actually take that and put it to something that's even of higher value, then that's going to be awesome.
All right, so I hope you're enjoying this interview here with Chris Johnson. Um, we talk a lot in this episode, and you hear him talking about hiring an acquisition manager. He's brought on somebody else. Like, he is coming into that place where he wants to leverage people to continue to live the lifestyle he has with his family, and not be the bottleneck for his business. It's so hard to let go, and it's even harder to understand what to be doing, who to be hiring, how do you leverage others, and how to actually get there. And this is exactly why we run the Dirt Hacker Challenge. This is a 5-day workshop that I run with my team. It's an hour every day, and it has nothing to do with like pricing, marketing. It's everything to do with how do we get on track to building the framework to actually bring on to people to actually essentially scale the business, or even a better word for that is to like find the freedom we wanted when we first came into land. Chris talks about this. Like, he does not want to be a high paying task doer. Um, and because I'm recording this after the interview, I don't know when this is going to be placed in the podcast, but he certainly does talk about that. And it was closer to the end of the podcast. And he was just getting paid a lot to do tasks. And ultimately, he's tied to the hours and he wants to pull himself out of the business. And this is exactly what we do in the Dirt Hacker Challenge. I spent 5 days talking and showing the framework we call the hack framework, really to getting processes in place. How do we start from tasks to actually building things like playbooks so you can pull yourself out of the business? Your playbooks are really your instruction manual for people to come in and replace you. How do we do that? How do we hire people? What is the journey? How do we make job postings? How do we then test? How do we filter people out? I talk about the 90-day game plan, and then also automations. Like, I know more and more automations and technology are playing a crucial role to scaling a business. It's why it's so important to have a centralized source of your data. That's what we do on the software side with Pebble, but also building processes and automations around that. So we touch upon building automations, and then even go further now. We're now touching upon AI. How does AI play a role in the land investing business? I love the world of AI, but it is constantly changing, and it's like I don't even know what's out there anymore. And there's a lot of discussion in these Dirt Hacker challenges about what kind of tools are out there, what are people doing. Like this week, I'm actually in the middle of running the Dirt Hacker challenge, and a lot of people are surprised. How can they clean up their list using OpenAI's ChatGPT, and how much time that saves. Like, it is crazy. So anyways, long story short here, the Dirt Hacker Challenge, this is exactly what I do. It happens once a month. If you're interested in joining me for this, I make this super accessible. It's a 5-day training thing. Go to dirthackerchallenge.com. I'll leave it at that. Go learn more about that. Get yourself on the path of scaling and building a sustainable business so you don't end up with a high paying task role or a high paying job. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the rest of this episode here with Chris. Yeah, yeah, that is that is awesome. Um, Chris, thank you so much for sharing. What's going on with you. It's a short 2 years. I feel like you've got way more experience under your belt, and maybe it's just the way you're so nonchalant about everything. I feel like in a good way too. But I'd love to get to know you on a personal level. I'm sure a lot of people would love to understand you. What you mentioned a couple things that you're doing. You're coaching. What outside of land? What else do you like doing? You've been coaching your son's what team again?
Soccer and t-ball.
Soccer and t-ball. What else do you like to be doing outside of work?
Yeah, I play a lot of pickleball right now. I used to play a lot of basketball and soccer, but I'm getting old now. I'm 35, so it's rough on my knees. And pickleball is just a ton of fun. So I probably play pickleball twice, 2 or 3 times a week.
Awesome.
Um, what else do I do? I mean, besides playing with my kids, we've been trying to take more vacations lately because I mean, just with small kids, it's just tough.
Yeah.
But now they're 3 and 4, and like I can actually have a conversation with them uh, and a little easier.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Chris, what is your favorite food?
Man, I'm so spoiled down here in Louisiana.
We
Uh,
talked about food too, I remember.
I know it. Well, we went to St. Louis together, and I don't think I had anything in St. Louis that was like, wow, this is really good.
Right.
So I know I'm spoiled down here. My favorite food right now in Louisiana, it's springtime. Everyone's doing crawfish boils. So I don't know if you've ever
I've
been to a
always wanted
crawfish
to
boil.
try.
Yeah,
You,
yeah. I
you,
mean, I love some crawfish.
I've
Uh,
never tried it before. I know that you guys do a big boil with a ton of spices and like there's sausage, corn, and all
yep.
this other stuff in there, and you eat by a garbage can where you're just dumping stuff in there the whole time. Is that how it works there?
Yeah. Yes.
We don't have anything remotely close to that up here in Vancouver, Canada, but I've seen it. I've always wanted to try it, and one of these days, maybe Chris, I'll have to try that with you.
Yeah.
Cool. Um, What's one thing that you did as a kid that you wish you could do more of nowadays? I mean, you've got kids now. I guess you could relive a lot of that with your kids. But is there anything in mind?
Man, I feel like that's kind of why I'm pretty happy-go-lucky and like just nonchalant about things, is because I still do the things. Like I still get out and play 2 or 3 times a week. Like I can jump on the trampoline with my kids or go to the park. And like I said, my wife still works 2 days a week. So 2 days a week, like I have my kids for 12 hours, like just like her nursing shift. So we do all kinds of stuff together. So I don't, um,
You're still doing it all, is what
still
you're
doing
saying.
it. Yeah. I'm just a big kid.
That's awesome. Is there one bad habit you are actively working on, whether it's within business or in life in general? Is there anything that you're actively working on?
Yeah. In business, it would be stop thinking that I can do everything better than everybody and
Mm.
just, you know,
Oh man,
take
what
the
a
time to
hard one.
take the time to train people and trust that, people are, I don't know. That's the problem. Like just outsourcing things. That's my problem in business. And in life it's living in Louisiana and having all this good food to eat. Eating too much of it. That's definitely a bad habit.
To the first point here, I totally get what you mean about letting go. That is definitely really really hard to do. Sometimes it's almost like you're emotionally attached to it. So I completely get where you're coming from. Chris, you've been awesome to interview. Two more questions here. If you could recommend one person to be on this podcast, I don't know if you regularly listen to it, but and does anybody come into mind that I should have on this podcast that maybe I haven't had on?
Hmm. I have listened to a lot of Pebble podcast, and I feel like everybody that I know in the land business has been on your podcast. Um, Yeah, there's so I know a guy in well, there's 2 people that are kinda local land investors, and I don't think they get on the national stage. Um, you got Josh Belgard, and he's out of Louisiana, and he's been doing it for a long time. He does big subdivides and things like that. And then I have a older man who's been doing it for like 40 years, and he lives in North Mississippi, named Keith Beardane, and he has no idea, about this whole land investing stuff online. He's been doing this since you rode over to somebody's house on a horse and knocked on their door and to see if they wanted to sell their land next door. But I think he would have some really cool, like old timey land stories.
Okay, well, I will. I'll reach out to you outside of this podcast
Yeah.
to get their information. Thank you for sharing that. And then last question for you and for the listeners here. If you were to start land again, let's say you were to start today, within your first 6 months, let's say, or the first several months, what are the biggest things you would do to get ramped up? Whatever that means to you, what would you be actively doing if you were starting as of today? And let's say you knew a little bit about land, or you went through, you understand the model and whatnot. What kind of things would you get in place in the first six?
I think I would almost do it a little bit backwards. I'd go find big time land investors and figure out like what they're looking for, what areas, and just go scrounge those leads up and try to make, wholesale fees like that until I had a little bit of cash. But knowing that you can double close, like really your mind is your only limit. Um, if you can, put an option agreement on $1 million piece of property, and if I wouldn't go putting everything under contract and then trying to cancel on people. I don't do that. I think I've had to cancel on maybe 2 contracts out of the 90 something deals I've done. Um, but if you make contact with if you make some contacts with buyers and other investors and you know what they're looking for, and you go get those deals for them somehow, whether that's mailing or cold calling or texting people off your personal cell phone, however, I feel like that's a good way to go about it. Just kind of make those contacts first.
Tactically, like, how would you make those contacts first? Like, is there a place that you would make those contacts? Where would somebody go and look and find and make those contacts, you would say?
Yeah, so I mean, it depends on where you live. If I was trying to do it somewhere where around where I live, I would look at like local RIA groups or Facebook groups, or just go on Facebook Marketplace and click on the properties that are for sale and see who's selling them, because that's a lot of those are other land investors or the assistants of other land investors. So you can always get started that way too. Um, yeah, that developers call surveyors and see if they have people that buy land in the area. I mean, there's a million ways to do it, but um, that's kind of what I would do. I would find the buyers first and then go look for deals.
Chris, I appreciate you very much for coming on this show, sharing us what the last 2 years looks like, how life looks like for you right now compared to what it was prior 2 years ago. Congrats on all the success you found.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure sort of hearing your story. I'm sure it's going to be an inspiration for a lot of people who are probably getting started and not finding, they're not sure how to get started. They're not sure how to find success yet. So thank you again for sharing your story, Chris.
No problem. Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye.
Before you stop this episode or hit the next episode, I want to personally thank you for listening to this episode of the Land Investing Business Secrets podcast by Pebble. If you found this helpful, we greatly appreciate any awesome reviews and ratings on whichever platform you are listening to this on. And if you have 2 minutes and wanted to step it up even more and help others, feel free to share this in other Facebook groups or pages or any communities, giving others a heads up of the Land Investing Business Secrets podcast or the specific episode that may help them on their land investing journey. Once again, thanks so much for listening, and catch you on our next episode.